When I saw the type of attacks and ambushes Ukraine launched on the Russians, I couldn't believe my eyes. It is one thing for them to fight back and conquer, but these combat missions were no ordinary attacks. I read that nearly 9,000 Russian tanks and over 20,000 Russian troops annihilated up till now, and that fact alone shocked me. Little did I know that there were more surprises to come. Ready to hear more? Keep on watching. Number 1. 6 missiles destroyed in one go. Imagine flying an F-16 jet at the start of your career, and you swoop in to bag the world record. That's the story of a Ukrainian pilot, and honestly, it has become one of my favorite survival stories from the war. During a massive attack, a Ukraine pilot destroys not 1, but 6 missiles in a single combat mission. That headline was no joke. It was enough to send the most seasoned experts into a state of shock. It all started with Ukraine asking for the F-16 in military aid, but no country was willing just to hand out these beasts to Ukraine. That started the long struggle for the country on top of war, of literally begging for aerial weapons and trying to prove that they could handle it. But as the war grew more intense, the picture was pretty clear in front of everyone. Ukraine needed all the help that it could get, especially if it had to stand up to Russia's modern aerial weapons. Because, let's be honest, they didn't have a lot going on in that area. They were stuck with Soviet-era aircraft, and they weren't doing as good a job as they thought. So finally, in the year 2023, the countries caved in to the request of Ukraine and decided to send in the F-16 jets. Denmark agreed to donate 19 jets in total, while the Netherlands promised to give 24 aircraft to Ukraine. Then, Norway also pitched in and claimed to give 6 jets. The only condition was that the Ukrainian pilots had to be trained abroad.
You know, it's always the same thing. We discuss, at the beginning everybody is reluctant, and at the end with the Leopards, with the F-16, at the end the decision comes to provide this military support because it's absolutely needed.
Shortly before the jets were delivered, Ukraine got to hear an earful on how it was going to take them years to fly the F-16 jets. The taunts kept coming in, along with a pinch of doubts. Experts and analysts were more worried about the hurdles that the pilots would have to jump through in Ukraine. But it was a win. Ukrainians had the jets in their hands now. The hard part was over. Or was it? Not from what I found out next. 11 countries pitched in to train the Ukrainian pilots to fly the F-16 jets. The pilots were getting all the help, and they needed it too. F-16 was not going to be an easy drive. At least, that's what the world thought. The Fighting Falcon, also known as the Viper, is a lightweight aircraft, a big upgrade from its previous models. It can fly at a blazing speed of 1,500 miles per hour and can fight at a radius of 300 to 400 miles. To aid with the combat, there are 2 short-range missiles, mid-range missiles, bombs, rockets, and a cannon. The model that Ukraine got pretty much had the same deal going on, but it had a 20mm cannon to fight, quite similar to a Hollywood action movie prop. After some lengthy training, the pilots were ready for combat. Then came one morning in December, the day that would leave the world in shock. In a gut-wrenching attack by the Russians, there were 200 drones and about 94 missiles in action. It was time for the Ukrainian pilots to dive in and get the job done. This was what they were trained to do, after all. But not one Ukrainian pilot. No, this rebel was doing something he wasn't even trained for. He saw a swarm of drones and jumped right into attack. He saw 2 enemy missiles coming in, locked the target, and struck at them with his own pair of mid-range missiles. Hits, one after the other. Then, just as he turned around after the win, he saw another pair swooping in after him. This time, he only had the short-range missiles with him. That meant he had to fly in at a range of 2 miles to have any chance of eliminating the enemy pair. It was no easy feat and extremely dangerous to be flying this close, but he locked in the targets and sent one missile after the other. Boom. The enemy pair turned to bits and pieces. The pilot had now used up all 4 of his short-range and mid-range missiles, defeating 4 enemy missiles in the battle. His guidance navigator asked him to change his position, seeing that he was running low on fuel. But this gutsy pilot wanted more action. He saw another target coming in and decided to stay, relying on his 20mm cannon. He knew the risks. Flying too close to the missiles meant they could explode and take him with them. Instant death. But flying too far meant he couldn't attack with his cannon. One missed shot and the missile would take him. Again, death. But the bigger problem was using the cannon. He had only used the cannon in simulation in a cozy seat at a training center. In that round, he easily won. But could he recreate the win in real life? Turns out, he can, and he did. When he saw the missile closing in, he flew close to 500 yards, drew his breath, and fired multiple shots at the cannon, hoping it would get the job done. It was a hit. The missile blew up, vanishing into a puff of black smoke. But then, he saw another explosion. What on earth was that? That's when he realized. There was another missile flying close to the target he had locked in. The Russians were known to send 2 missiles close to each other to trick the enemy. Little did they know, it wouldn't budge this gutsy pilot. Although an accidental hit, the pilot got out of there, alive and breathing. And you know what the pilot had to say after? "I tried, it worked." Seriously? How cool can this pilot get? With this amazing feat, he has snatched a world record and on his first serious military mission at that. Number 2. The DIY drones. People had ruled out Ukraine long before the war even began. But then things changed. It was in 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. But even after 3 years, Ukraine is still standing strong, destroying Russia's top-notch, flashy, and combat-ready weapons that are nearly worth $1 million. Who knew the tables would turn around and Russia would regret even making that dumb move? I, for one, am shocked that it all turned out this way. But when I see how Ukraine is handling its batch of old, battered, and Soviet-era weapons, I can't help but be impressed. I mean, you have to see this. Only someone with the mind of Tesla could turn these vintage pieces into absolute beasts in combat. YouTube. Meet Ukraine's DIY drones, the weapons made on the kitchen table, the beasts that can destroy millions of dollars worth of Russian tanks, and the surprise that Russians never saw coming. These are actually the FPV drones, or the first-person view drones, that the Ukrainians have modified to turn into kamikaze drones. The ambition seems unmatched, doesn't it? A couple of $100 worth of a machine to take on hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of a monster. But the Ukrainians made it possible. By strapping an explosive on the drone with tape and hardware, they turned it into a low-cost weapon. That was the main goal, to rely less on military aid and focus more on makeshift weapons. The plan worked, and Ukraine had stacks and stacks of these kamikaze-style drones in hand. The next step is to get near, because these things only work when they attack the target at close range. That wasn't a big deal. All the Ukrainians needed were 2 drones, 2 operators, and a driver to take them closer to the target. One drone helps them locate the target, while the other is the attacking drone. They set themselves up nearly 2 miles from the target and launched a surprise attack on the Russians. The attack works even from 7 miles as long as they go for the weak points of the target. A tank usually has many, if you know where to attack. But can't the Russians detect these drones flying in the sky beforehand? That's the problem. Ukrainians have been using low-quality cameras for their FPV drones. The signals that these cameras transmit are almost impossible to be scrambled by Russia's fancy electronic warfare system. From Russian trucks carrying weapons to the base to tanks carrying soldiers, tell me what these kamikaze-style drones haven't destroyed. The experts didn't even know what to say. Once the Russians figured out what the Ukrainians were doing, they had already made nearly 50,000 drones.
Тим, що ми допомагаємо фронту, допомагаємо армії, допомагаємо наближаємо перемогу таким чином. Тому що ми розуміємо, що дрони – це один з таких стовпів перемоги.
And the number keeps piling up. I wonder what's going to happen next in this bizarre battle. The news is that Russia is going to copy the same design and surprise Ukrainians. Let's see what happens. Talking about innovation, Ukrainians didn't stop here. Although I do not know much about this next big feat of theirs, I have to share it with you. It is too thrilling for me to gatekeep it. I'm telling you, if they have actually pulled this off, it is a game changer. Do you remember how Russia bragged for the longest time about their unjammable drones? Explosive drones packed with a mighty power punch and connected to operators by fiber optic cables. These were the stars of the time. They could deliver precise strikes at the Ukrainian troops, leaving them no room to fight back. Before the Ukrainians could even realize what was going on, a powerful blast would take over the troops and turn everything into a black cloud of smoke. It seems like the perfect weapon in combat, doesn't it? Undetectable, untrackable, unbeatable, and it could pull off surprise attacks. Russians had surely cracked the code, rendering electronic warfare practically useless. But then, the tides changed. Ukrainians released a video of them tracking and attacking the very same Russian drone, turning it into bits and pieces. They claimed that they had designed a mobile radar system that could detect the drones from miles away. Now, they have kept much of the secrets of this bizarre radar system classified. But I cannot help but think that if they truly have hunted down these unjammable Russian drones, then they might just get away with anything. No, I am serious. The Russians can bring in the fanciest of weapons and pool in millions of dollars to make their military operations look scary. But the Ukrainian troops are willing to do just about anything to fight back. Number 3. The sneaky attack. This is one of the biggest attacks that Ukraine launched on the Russians. It wasn't just me who was left shocked at the gutsy attitude of the Ukrainians. Even the world couldn't believe it. The nasty surprise came not even a day ago when Ukrainians decided to target the energy facilities of Russia. This massive blow came in the form of a dozen scary-looking drones in the middle of the night. The drones took out the facilities and left a massive cloud of black smoke in the air. Locals were awakened by the loud explosion, one after the other.
Капец, короче, все горит тут. В первую очередь горит. Жесть.
Flights were disrupted, leaving the entire country in a state of fear, panic, chaos, screams everywhere. There were no casualties, but there was a whole lot of debris. The Russians had to say something back. So, not long after the explosion, they launched an attack to fight back with the Ukrainians, but it was too late. The largest refinery in southern Russia was down. The same refinery that pushed 300,000 barrels a day and processed over 13 million metric tons of oil was gone into a puff of smoke. This was just one of the attacks. The Astrakhan plant produced 700,000 tons of gasoline, along with 492,000 tons of diesel, and nearly 300,000 tons of fuel. That was gone too. Poof, everything gone. When Russia retaliated, the Ukrainian Airforce claimed to have taken down 38 Russian drones. On the other hand, Russia claims to have taken down 70 Ukrainian drones. The numbers and the win might be debatable in this battle, but it was a definitive win for the Ukrainians in this next combat. Number 4. The Great Ambush. The Russian troops were confident about this attack. With advanced vehicles on their end, they knew that they could take this Ukrainian village in a jiffy. At least that's what they thought. And this wasn't any ordinary assault by the Russians. It was a massive one. With nearly 50 vehicles and hundreds of troops, it was probably the biggest force we have seen in action until now. They came here to win. The Ukrainians put up a strong battle. But when the Ukrainian troops retreated after seeing the massive army of Russians, the Russians only grew more in confidence. Heads held high, they started putting in more speed on their formation. They had no idea that they were pulling in closer and closer to the hidden trap, laid out just for them. The M142 High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, more commonly known as the HIMARS. This absolute beast sits quietly on a vehicle, buying time until it is turned towards a target. It annihilates its prey into bits and pieces. It is more of a rocket launcher system, but there are many rockets aboard the vehicle. It would take longer for you to name all the rockets than it would take for the rocket launcher to fire its best shot. You want to know why? Because this monster can shoot about 6 rockets in a single minute. Some of them have a range of over 180 miles. That's not all. The HIMARS can also launch GPS-guided rockets to ensure that the rocket hits the target. It saves up on the ammo and gives an accurate shot to the Ukrainians. It is a win-win, but there was no bigger win than when the Russian troops fell into the HIMARS kill zone. It is unclear how many Russians fell into the kill zone and how many were hit, but it is safe to say that the Ukrainians definitely were the bigger power that day. You think this was badass? Wait till you find out what Ukraine has been doing on land and you might just give them the superpower status. I mean, I don't know about you, but I definitely think of them as a force to be reckoned with, especially after seeing all their crazy tactics in combat. Number 5, the many combat wins. I get it, Ukraine knows how to give a tough time to the Russians. These videos from the ground operations are only proof of that. Wait till I show them to you. One by one, how the Ukrainians managed to obliterate the Russian troops in combat missions. Let's take a look. The most brutal 24 hours. YouTube. According to the reports, Ukrainian Marines took down 3 Russian air defense systems, worth $15 million each.
We can assess now that the Russian troops have begun the battle for Donbass, for which they have been preparing for a long time.
And one ZRK that goes at a whopping price tag of $10 million. On top of that, the Ukrainian ground troops terminated more than 1,500 army formations and nearly 14 tanks on the same day. There were over 184 clashes between the two on the ground, and the Ukrainians managed to destroy some more fancy military tech of the Russians. All of this on a single day, only in 24 hours. I don't even know what to make of this. Is that even real news? The intense combat. But then I see a video like this, and I have no choice but to believe all these wild claims. This battle was between a Bradley fighting vehicle and a Russian T-90 tank. On a normal day, I would bet on the Russian T-90 tank to take the smashing win without breaking a sweat. But seeing how the underdogs of this war have been rising to the battle, I knew I shouldn't have spoken too early. Let me break it down for you. The T-90 tank is the most formidable and intimidating weapon that the Russians have hidden in their bases. Putin called it the world's most advanced main battle tank. I don't even blame him for saying that. The tank has a mighty powerful 125mm cannon, along with a 7.62mm machine gun. On top of that, the tank has armor-bursting ammo, high-explosive anti-tank shells, and guided missiles. On the other hand, the U.S. Bradley fighting vehicle has a 25mm chain gun and an anti-tank missile launcher. You see what I'm saying? I wouldn't even put these two on paper in a combat, let alone root for the Bradley to win. Yet here's what happened. Two Bradleys ambushed the T-90 tank near a village. Before the T-90 tank could even breathe fire, the Bradleys launched a powerful attack. Shot after another, the crew seated inside didn't even know where to aim. They were completely blindsided. Then, within seconds, the T-90 tank's armor blew open and exploded into a puff of black smoke. The tank was down, and the Bradleys proudly took that win. Now, do you get my surprise? Well, there's more from where I am coming from. Wait till you see the next one. The dramatic attack. The Leopard 2 is a tank from the 1970s, but the one that Ukrainians got was a bit different. The Ukrainian version had a 120mm L55 gun instead of the 120mm L44 gun, a longer barrel that could strike at the target with much more force and precision. But let's forget the technicalities. Let's hit right into this dramatic footage that will leave you gaping with shock, just like it did with this column of Russian tanks quietly making their way on the road. They had no clue that the Ukrainian Leopard 2 tank was hiding in the bushes, waiting like an ambush predator to launch its attack. Once in view, the tank launched its surprise fire at the incoming Russian tanks. Kaboom! Down goes the tank into a massive explosion. The Russian troops got all panicky and turned around to flee from the terror of a single Leopard tank. But that was their next big mistake. The side of a tank is another weak point that the Ukrainians didn't shy away from hitting. Boom, another explosion after another, strike after strike after strike. The long line of tanks was under attack, and there was nothing the crew could do about it. So they packed their bags, left the tanks, and bolted out of there as fast as their legs could take them. It was either them or the tanks, and they chose the tanks to be destroyed by the enemy fire. It wasn't a hard choice. Made by Germans, modified by Germans, but being used to rain terror on Russians by Ukrainians. That sounds about right. You think Ukrainians have only made a name in land and air combat? Well, then the next bit will surely shock you. Number 6, retaking the Snake Island. By now, I didn't think anything else would surprise me about the Ukrainians. But then this video popped up, and I honestly do not know what to make of it. They surely are gutsy fellows. And the footage of one Ukrainian cussing at the Russian warship after it comes to take them away only proves what I think about them. But to show you what I mean, I am going to take you back to 2022, when the drama really became intense for the two countries. Let's head to the Snake Island. In the early days of the invasion, Russians knew they had to strike hard and strike good. So they went after the Snake Island. The Vasily Baikov was the main patrol ship, and the Moskva was the cruiser. They both were at the front, trying their best to intimidate the Ukrainians, with a massive fleet on the Russian end and only 13 Ukrainian border guards on the island. The win came pretty easy for the Russians. Snake Island was one of the most popular Ukrainian ports for shipping grain to the world. By taking over that port, the Russians wanted to make a statement. they had the power. But maybe they became a bit too arrogant on the battlefield, because what happened 2 months later was not something they were expecting. This time, Ukraine wasn't empty-handed. They had a good batch of weapons to try and attack the ships sitting arrogantly near the island. But the star of the show was the Neptune anti-ship missiles. You can see the whole drama unfold in this video. The Ukrainians came up with a smart plan to lure the giant Russian vessel closer to the shore. They used a small ship to do the job, and the bait worked. The vessel was making its way to the place where Ukrainians had secretly set up camp. Also hiding on the shore was a missile battery, the weapon that would soon sink the Russian vessel into the sea. The attack was in motion. The shots kept coming one after the other, giving absolutely no time for the Russians to defend in the dark night. Suddenly, the open fire stops, and all you can see is one small ball of light in the sky. That's the Russian vessel on fire. Soon after the hit, the Russian vessel sank into the sea, and the media later confirmed it. The massive vessel was all that the Russians had to make a bold statement at the Snake Island.
This used to be a museum to Achilles, who legend has it was buried on the island. The Russians turned it into a military position. All the things are left around here, including this ration pack, which says Army of Russia.
With that down in the sea, they had no choice but to retreat. Ukrainians later saw a few Russian troops fleeing the island on 2 tiny speedboats. The island was now back in the hands of Ukraine. It was a big win. But an even bigger win was seeing the Russians react to their embarrassing loss at Snake Island. You have to hear this. Apparently, the Russians later told the media how they left Snake Island on goodwill. They claimed that they weren't forced out of the island. Sure thing, fella. That's what happened here. Not you running away like cowards. Whatever makes you sleep at night. That's all, folks, on the absolute domination that Ukrainians did over Russians. It is not like Russians didn't get their share of wins in the war, but the way Ukrainians pulled up to their own rescue is something out of this world, don't you think? If you have anything to share, do not forget to write it down in the comments section below. While you are at it, make sure to smash the like button, hit subscribe, and press the bell icon if you want to hear more of this. Stay tuned, and thanks for watching. And thanks for watching. And thanks for watching.